Hi, I'm Jackie Flowers, and I'm a history professor at Clackamas Community College. I teach history. Um, when I first started college myself as an undergraduate, I was young. I was just 16 years old, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I enjoyed biology and the sciences, and I was really good at math, and I thought, well, I'll do something in science. I'll do something with research. I knew that I would go to graduate school ultimately because you had to do that if you wanted to do any kind of work in a lab in the sciences. And so I started with my courses in biology. I was going to get a minor, and I did get a minor in chemistry and physics. And there was one problem, and that was I decided when I was a junior I didn't want to do that anymore. I think a lot of students probably come to that point after they've done a lot of their upper level coursework, and they just say, well, this really isn't for me. And the reason I thought that was in part because I have very delicate skin, and every time I worked in a lab with fumes in it at all, or around chemicals, my skin would get all inflamed, and it just didn't work. So I thought, well, if I can't work in some kind of research lab, I just don't think I want to do this at all. My parents insisted that I finish that particular degree, so I did. And then they said I could go anywhere I wanted to go, and I could major in anything I wanted to major in, and they would pay for it. So I went to University of Tennessee, Knoxville, which was a much larger college, still not too far from home. And I didn't know what I was going to major in. This was the days when you went to registration and you walked around and there were lines for every discipline, actually for several lines for every discipline. And you would stand in a big line in an auditorium or a gym, and you would get to the front and see if there were any spots left. And if so, you'd get to put your name on the list. And so I wandered around. I looked at all the books that would be used for different classes. My mind was leaning toward industrial, or actually civil engineering. But I looked at the books and thought, this doesn't look very good at all. And so the books that caught my eye were actually the books in the history classes. And so I thought, well, just for fun, I'll just take history classes this term because it was kind of late to register and those were open still. And so it seemed like a good thing to do. And so I decided pretty quickly that those were fun and I enjoyed them. And it took just 1 year of academic work to add a second bachelor's in history to my list. But then I had worked, or I'd been in school for a long time. I was 21. I'd been in school since I was 16 in college. And so I took the PACE exam. It was the professional career exam for federal government service at the time. They don't actually use it anymore. But it was a competitive exam to get civil service jobs with the federal government. And I took it mainly because my boyfriend at the time was taking it and he wanted me to go with him. So I think he needed a ride. So I aced it. I've always been a good test taker, and got job offers all of a sudden. So I took a job with the U.S. Navy as a civilian, and I worked as a personnel management specialist and then as an industrial engineer for 10 years altogether. But I always wanted to go back and do graduate work, and I decided that it was time to do that or not do it at all when I was about 30. And so I thought, okay, there's only one school in the driving range, which was like still an hour and a half drive away, and that was University of South Carolina. In Columbia. That was the only college that offered PhDs, and so I thought, well, I guess I'll do it in history. But really, I thought, before I even got to that point, I thought, what kind of job do I want? What do I want to be doing every day? I didn't really enjoy working for the Navy. It was okay, but it wasn't something I looked forward to every day, and it was demanding, and it required a lot of travel, and I'd gotten tired of that, and so. So I thought about what did I really look for, and I thought, well, I really would like to have a job where I do something that I'm enjoying and that I would do even if I weren't being paid for it, and which seems like an unbelievable kind of thing, like that's unreasonable to even ask for. And I also wanted to have a job where I would have lots of time off because I wanted to have time to travel. I love to travel. There's other things I like to do, so I thought I don't want to be tied down with just, for example, 5 days of leave left at the end of the year. So, and then I thought, what do I like to do? Well, I love to read, I like to write, and unlike most of the people I think in our society, I really like to get up in front of a bunch of people and talk. And so I decided, well, I know what this means. This means teach college, and that requires a PhD. the question then was, which field? And I narrowed it down. It could be history, or it could be English literature, or American lit, but literature. And because I love to read, and I read a lot of literature, and I thought, well, I like to read that, but I didn't like the books that were used that you would have to read in graduate school as an English lit major, because this period everything was into deconstruction, and you had to look at the text and tear it apart. And what I wanted to do was read the text and then put it in its cultural context, its historical context. And to do that, you really have to be a historian. So I decided that I would get my PhD in history, and that way I would get to read whatever I wanted to of the literary canon, but particularly I focused on early 20th century America. So I was able to read all kinds of novels, watch films, read magazines from the 1920s and 30s from American era. My research was actually a little bit later than that. It was Vietnam War era, and I got to read and research 11 years worth of Life magazines for photographs of the Vietnam War. And I also got to stand in a room and teach classes occasionally while I was in graduate school. And then I thought it would just take a few years to do a PhD. I didn't realize that it actually was a much longer process, especially in history, one of the fields that are in less demand for the job market. And so I finished in 8.5 years, and I worked part-time at a community college in Charleston for about a year. I filled in for a man who was dying of cancer. So I had a full-time load for about a year, and then I finished up my dissertation and started looking for a job. And I didn't realize that it would be really difficult to find a teaching job. I thought, well, once you get your PhD, you're probably going to have a choice. You'll get a state university at least. And I found out that that wasn't true, because I would put in for a job and I would get a letter back that, oh, we had 287 applicants for this particular job. We are looking for someone with more experience than you, or something like that. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to fling open the gates and I'm going to apply everywhere, as long as, my criteria were, as long as it's close enough to the ocean that I can get there without it being an overnight trip. I didn't really care which coast it was on. I had this kind of southern disposition to avoid California at all costs. I'm not sure why. But other than that, I was pretty open. And so I had an interview. My first interview was at a small college in Missouri, but it was on the river, so it had something going for it, but I really didn't want to go there. And before they made a decision, I had a second interview call, which was to come to Clackamas Community College. This was a cross-country flight. They told me I needed to come the next weekend, which meant 1 week of prep, had to buy my own ticket, had to make my own arrangements. And I asked if there was someone who was already teaching internally that was likely to get the job, and I was told no. And so I came on out, and I had my interview, and I was able to see several things. My interview was in June, and there were several things that appealed to me right away. Number one, the college is really pretty. I mean, when you compare it to other community colleges and other campuses around, I'm used to the old historic campuses, but for modern campuses, this one is really quite pretty. The landscaping is especially nice. And I loved the fact that there's a really active, lively theater program here. That was something that I hadn't seen at a community college in South Carolina, where I came from. So that made me think this would be a really nice place. Secondly, it was June, and in South Carolina, it was hot as all get out in June already, as usual. So the days were like 95 degrees and humid, and then it would cool down to 82 degrees in the nighttime. So it was really miserable already. I always hated the southern summers. And so when I came here, it was really great. It was cool. It was 65 degrees or something. I was like, I can't believe it. This is amazing. This must be unusual weather. But I was thrilled with that. And then I was told, no, this is normal. And I drove. I had to fly into Seattle because I had to get the airplane ticket quickly. And so my plane flew into Seattle, and I rented a car to drive down to Portland. And on my way here, I saw 4 or 5 rainbows along the way. Of course, that was because it rained off and on the whole way down the highway. But I wasn't concerned about the rain. It was the rainbows. I thought, that's a sign. So my interview went well. it was kind of short. In fact, I thought it might have been a little too short because I thought they certainly won't hire me based on just that interview. But the surprising thing was when I got back to my motel room, my husband called and said, "They've already called you." And I said, "Oh my gosh, you're kidding." So I thought, wow, that's really exciting. And so when I got back to South Carolina the next day, I got the call and was offered the job. And I couldn't just accept it right off the bat because it's across country. All my family, all my husband's family, they're all in South Carolina and North Carolina. And so I wasn't sure what to do. And my husband really balked at the idea. He was retired, but he balked at moving away from his family, his kids, and that kind of thing. And so we made a deal. We'd come out, we'd try it 3 years max. If we didn't like it, we'd move back to South Carolina. And now it's been 17 years, so I obviously loved it. My husband still occasionally says things like, "We're never moving back to South Carolina, are we?" And I'll say, "I don't think so." We can go visit whenever you want, but I think that we're going to stay right here. And I love it because I really do enjoy talking in front of a class. I really do enjoy talking to my students one-on-one. And I really love it when I come across students who actually love history too. I don't find that too often because I think you have to have a teeny bit more age behind you to really appreciate U.S. history. I found that to be the case. I don't want to sound like I'm stereotyping younger students because I was a 16-year-old in college, but I didn't really start loving history until I was 21 or 22. And I think that's the case. But in any case, I've loved this job. It's something that I would do for free. But don't tell the administration that. Thank you.